Joining me now to discuss the intersection of voting rights and abortion access, Melissa Murray. She is the faculty director at Birnbaum Women's Leadership Network at NYU School of Law, and Fernanda Santos, an opinion columnist for The Washington Post. Fernanda, I want to start with the audit in Arizona. The Republican chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors this week called it a grift disguised as an audit. Tell me more.
And that wasn't the only thing he called, Alicia. First of all, great to be here with you. So he called it a circus, and in many ways, that's what it is. These votes in Maricopa County, which is the largest county in Arizona, it's Phoenix is the county seat, have been counted and recounted, and now they're being counted by hand by auditors, as you said at the top of the hour, that who have made mistakes and have blamed the Democrats for those mistakes and then found out, whoops, we actually were the ones who were doing things wrong. But what it's really doing is sowing even more distrust on the results of an election in a state that went for Joe Biden, for a Democrat, for the first time since Bill Clinton was elected president in the 90s. So it's obviously a cause for concern about the sanctity of the democratic process.
Melissa, GOP leaders in other areas of the country are eyeing similar audits. In Georgia, a county judge approved a review of absentee ballots in the state's most populated county. These are the same states where lawsuits were tossed out of court for lack of legal standing in the weeks after the election. What has changed to allow for these audits now?
Not much has changed. I mean, again, they are pressing forward, hoping to get some recourse in the courts. But again, the fundamentals are not that different. We had an election. There was no evidence of voter fraud, or certainly no appreciable evidence of voter fraud. But still, you've seen this big lie persist. And more importantly, it's not just these lawsuits, but also the spate of ever restrictive voter registration laws and voter suppressive laws that have been passed in these states that are controlled by Republican legislatures. And again, it all goes to the point that you made at the top of this block, that this is an attempt to trim the electorate for the purpose of limiting participation with certain groups.
Fernanda, the anti-abortion movement now backs voter suppression efforts in the name of election integrity, fueled by Donald Trump's big lie. I wonder what you see as the connection between voting restrictions and the efforts to strip away any number of other rights.
Arizona is a great barometer for the country because it's a state in great transition, right? You have a rising population of Latino population. It's projected the state by 2030 will be a minority majority state. So what we're seeing here now is really that tension between the white Anglo majority that is seeing its power wane, and saw it very much so in 2020 with the presidential election results, and the rising brown communities of color who have organized around and really mobilized a lot of new voters in the state. There's also a lot of inroads being made by independents and people who are more moderate, who are kind of sick of this extreme politics from the Republican Party. So I see all of that, Alicia, as a last-ditch effort for control here in every which way, be it election results, be it abortion laws or other types of restrictive laws.
And this is exactly why I'm obsessed with Arizona, because, as you said, I do think it is a microcosm for what is happening or could happen in the rest of the country. Melissa, when it comes to banning abortions and restricting ballot access, Republicans now have a 6-3 conservative majority in the Supreme Court. How is the new makeup of the court a game changer for pushing this agenda?
Well, it's absolutely consequential, Alicia. We saw with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the court went from a 5-4 conservative majority to a 6-3 conservative supermajority. And all you need to know, in thinking about what that means going forward, is to think about last term, where we saw June Medical Services. This was another abortion challenge, this time to an admitting privileges law from Louisiana, where we saw the Chief Justice peel off and join the liberal wing of the court to strike down that law on the ground that a similar law had been struck down just 4 years earlier. Now, the Chief Justice is no longer in that swing justice position. He cannot make a majority because there are only 3 liberals on the court, and the conservatives do not need him to form a majority because they already have 5. So you have 4 votes, I think, if you're counting, to overrule Roe entirely, and all you need is 1 more to make a majority, and it doesn't have to be the Chief Justice. And so I think you're going to see a lot of really institutional dynamics going around the court at this point, and I think the best case scenario going forward is that perhaps the Chief Justice joins the conservative majority so that he will have the prerogative to assign the opinion to himself and write a narrower ruling that does not explicitly overrule Roe, but simply changes the law slightly in the hopes of avoiding that bigger political flashpoint that overruling Roe would certainly portend.
Well, I'm glad you said that because, Melissa, I know that I always come to you for legal analysis, but I have a political question. You will tell me whether or not you feel equipped to handle it. Otherwise, I'll kick it over to Fernanda. But where the Republican base is on this question of reproductive rights and access is not where America is. A Pew Research Center survey finds about 6 in 10 Americans think abortion should be legal in all or most cases. So if the Supreme Court weakens Roe, your sense then of the broader political consequences for Republicans, for Democrats, I mean, if this happens in the lead up to 2022?
So you're exactly right. For the Republican base, overruling Roe is the great white whale that they've been trying to have happen for the last 30 years. But it's not popular with the overwhelming majority of American voters who favor reproductive rights in some capacity. The Chief Justice, who very much cares about the court's institutional reputation, understands that. I imagine he did not want to take up this case going into the midterm elections. And the fact that this case was on the court's cert list for weeks. It was heard in conference 17 times before they decided to grant cert. And you only need 4 justices to grant cert. So that suggests there was some infighting here. And so I think what the Chief Justice would want to do is avoid that more explosive ruling, overruling Roe entirely, and maybe tinker at the edges a little bit, let the elections happen, and then the court can take up yet another abortion challenge and finish the job.
Fernanda, one of the things that struck me about your great Washington Post op-ed about what is happening in Arizona is that you frame it as an opportunity cost, right? There is a lot of money that is going into these efforts that could be spent otherwise on other things. I wonder if you could just sort of walk us through that, because I think it is one of the ways in which we have not talked about it, right? This is a ton of time. It's a ton of effort. It's a ton of money that could be spent and put on something else.
And I think that's the last part that we forget to talk about, right? We say, oh, it costs a lot of money, taxpayer money, but what else could we be spending that money on? And it was when I heard of the figure $6 million, well, for the budget of a great corporation, it's really nothing. But for a community, for a local organization that does work on the ground, it's a lot of money. So I called, for example, a woman who runs the largest emergency shelter here in the state, a state that is, like most other states in the country, facing a looming crisis with evictions as the pandemic relief money ends. And she gasped when I told her, what would you do if you had $6 million? And the solutions are many. One of the things she could do is buy an entire hotel to take senior citizens off the streets. Many of the homeless people in Arizona are 65 and older, and that's true in other parts of the country as well. We're 55 and older, an aging population. So, it's moments like these that we have to think about the opportunities missed and then use that to turn the public opinion, really open the eyes of people whose eyes can still be open to what it is that we're missing out on, how we should put pressure on our elected officials. The governor of Arizona, Republican, has not made any pronouncements regarding the audit. And how can we turn that around and take that money and do something positive for the state?